But there's 5,000 head of deer that go through there every year. And so they put the money together and purchased this chunk of property, put an easement on it so it'll forever be open for wildlife. They gave it to the Wyoming Game and Fish to manage. And now you can see the current data. You can see all these deer funnel right through that chunk of property. That is just one example of, if you'd have cut that off, those deer would have died because they wouldn't have been able to get to the winter range. And a lot of people go, well, they'll just, they'll change their migration pattern. They won't change the migration pattern. They found out that deer do not. They'll just hold up and end up dying.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast.
All righty, Ike. Thank you very much. It's good seeing you again. I think it's been since Portland.
It has. That town looks a lot different than when we left it.
I wouldn't know. I haven't been back.
I've heard. At least on TV, it looks different.
Yeah. Well, you guys have been working on mule deer a lot, and you've been working on this migration video that's coming out. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So about a year ago, I was introduced to a project that they've been doing for, since 2013. The Wyoming Game and Fish collaborated with the University of Wyoming, and they started basically two guys at I think it was a moose banquet, just talking mule deer, and come to find out, one of them was Gary Freilich, who is the biologist in the Wyoming and Salt River Range here in Wyoming. It's one of the largest herds of deer that migrate, one of the furthest out west. And he was talking to a new biologist, a new PhD from the University of Wyoming, Kevin Monteith, who is University of Wyoming's assistant professor, and he is a mule deer nut. Now, one of the coolest things is you couldn't have placed these two guys any better. Kevin Monteith is a hunting guy. He grew up in South Dakota, family hunting. He was really wanting to be a game warden or something similar to that, and got into school and just kind of rolled with it and found out that school fit him, but he's really good at it. But he did his I think it was his PhD on mule deer habitat and migration, as well as horn growth. He gets a job at the University of Wyoming, and Gary Freilich, who is a biologist there in the Wyoming range, which is basically the entire western side of Wyoming and Salt River Range. And these deer migrate. Everybody knew they migrated out from there out to the Red Desert, which is a pretty long trip. I mean, 50, 60 miles is what they thought. He's been the biologist there for 27 years. And he sets up that season's only been like a 2-week season for a really, really long time. For Wyoming residents, it's over the counter. It used to be a pretty easy tag to draw as a non-resident. He would set up a game check station and check every deer that came out of those two ranges. So he had photos and documented, certain things, not only antler growth, but just how good the species doing for 27 years, thousands of deer. And so these two guys get to talking, and they come up with this idea that there's technology now that they can utilize that is going to make managing deer easier. So they get involved with the GIS division of the University of Wyoming, which is actually a federal division, but they have some monies to set aside for state funds. And so they formulate this plan to build collars for deer that, back in the day, radio collars, they'd only last a year or two. Well, these GPS collars, they'll last 10 years. And so they started trapping does and putting GPS collars, because what they want to find out is how far are these deer traveling, and is the growth, the rural growth, human aspect of it really affecting these deer's migration. Plus, they did some other things with habitat. What kind of habitat are they foraging on throughout the year? Well, while this was all going on, the Department of Interior, the secretary, was sent a plan by a guy named Casey Stimler. And I'm going to sidestep here for a second. Casey Stimler's dad actually toured with our deer tour. His dad was one of the guys behind the booth for like 20 years with our deer tour back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Oh, wow.
His name is Don. Don was a great guy, is a great guy. Casey went through college and started working in the Federal Fish and Wildlife and became the assistant director for a while. And now he is pretty high up in the Department of Interior. And he wrote this. He was at a conference, and they were talking about wildlife, what they can do, project wise. And he kind of got upset in the sense that we have a tendency to do conservation stuff for 2 or 3 years, and then there's a new administration or there's a new something that happens, and we sidestep and do something else. So he wrote this letter. I told him at lunch in Laramie, I said, "You're kind of like Jerry Maguire. You wrote this memo, except instead of getting fired, you got told, okay, that's your project." He was like, "Whoa, this is way out of my scope." So he had to put together, and the secretary wanted a secretary order, which these are pretty complicated and very unique. He wanted a secretary order in, I think it was a matter of weeks. And so Casey worked day and night, built a secretary order on how to do wildlife projects out west best. And as you know, the BLM is the largest landowner in the United States. It's significant. I can't remember how many hundreds of millions of acres they own, but it's a lot. Right. So when it comes to wildlife, they have a huge stake in this. As the landowner, you're a rancher, you understand the rancher has a huge stake in not only ranching, but also what the wildlife on your ranch, how they're treated and the forages and the water and all that stuff. So Casey writes this thing, and the Secretary of State agrees to it, and they put it into action 3 years ago. And what it was is states come to them with 3 to 5 projects, and these are projects that span over 10 years. Because this is secretary order, it can't just be manipulated. It has to be either carried out, or a new secretary has to build a new secretary order to reverse it, which is more complicated than most people want to do. And they threw out, and I can't remember, it's tens, if not, it's tens of millions of dollars, 50 or 60 million bucks at this project. And what their part isn't radio collars, that's GIS. Their part isn't the study, that's the University of Wyoming, that's the Game and Fish. Their part is, okay, once you guys figure this out, once you figure out what the problems are that we can affect, we'll throw the money at fixing those problems. So it's really simple. It's highway crossings. It's buying properties that are about to become developments and that are on migration corridors. It's buying those properties. It's helping easements. You have a large landowner who's considering selling or needs a tax break because of passing it down or whatever. It's money going towards helping build those easements so that property is forever, wildlife friendly, or it's wildlife friendly fences. One of the main problems in Wyoming is when you have a 4 or 5 strand fence, a deer goes to jump it, gets his back legs tangled in the top of in the second wire, and he's done. It's just projects like that. Now, they don't actually do the projects. BLM doesn't most of the time. They don't actually do them. they lean on the Mule Deer Foundation, or they lean on the Elk Foundation, or they lean on Wyoming, in this case is Wyoming Muley Fanatics, to do the projects, but they'll fund it. They'll do all the funding for it. So when you have a trifecta like that, or actually 4 entities, the nonprofits, the federal government being the Department of Interior, University of Wyoming with the studies, the Game and Fish with the research, when you have all that come together, you can actually make a huge impact. So they studied these deer since 2013, and they found out that these deer migrate way longer than they thought. In fact, there's they've been toting this doe that she migrated 242 miles one way each year. So she was going close to 500 miles 1 year each year to migrate from where she would summer, where she would have a fawn, to where she would winter in January, February, and rut. And what that allowed them to do is find these corridors. There's a chunk of property just north of Pinedale. It was 340 acres. And they found out that all these deer funnel, like 5,000, not all these deer, but 5,000 out of 40,000 deer, 5,000 of them were migrating through this corridor. And this 340 acres was due to become a development. I mean, it was for sale, purchased. They had the plots built for cottages. It's around a little lake. It's a lot of people's dream. But there's 5,000 head of deer that go through there every year. And so they put the money together and purchased this chunk of property, put an easement on it so it'll forever be open for wildlife. They gave it to the Wyoming Game and Fish to manage. And now you can see the current data. You can see all these deer funnel right through that chunk of property. That is just one example of, if you'd have cut that off, those deer would have died because they wouldn't have been able to get to the winter range. And a lot of people go, well, they'll just, they'll change their migration pattern. They won't change the migration pattern. They found out that deer do not. They'll just hold up and end up dying. Other species, they will change their migration patterns, but deer are so habitual that they won't. They just won't do it. And the other problem with deer is, because they won't change their migration pattern, they won't spread out. So you won't have deer migrating or moving into new areas very easily. They have this thing that's called a rose petal. So they have a doe that her offspring, she'll have her offspring in a certain spot, and then her offspring, so she'll have a doe, and then that doe will have an offspring, and then that doe will have an offspring in the same area every single spring. And then they take those offsprings and they go to the summer range, they go to the winter range the exact same way. They're completely, unbelievably habitual, which means they're very delicate. So what we decided to do is, hey, I asked these guys, knowing Casey since we were kids, and knowing Gary Freilich since I was a kid, and being introduced to Matt Monteith, saying, okay, what can we do to help? Is it a money thing? Are you guys looking for funds? Are you looking for knowledge? Are you what can we do? And the number one thing is, get involved. They said, listen, we don't have a money problem. We have a perception problem. How can they said, we are looking to you guys to get the word out. Let hunters know, let non-hunters know that this is what's happening. This is why the state bought 340 acres in Pinedale. And this is what's happening, and get involved. You can be part of the Mule Deer Foundation or Muley Fanatics, and you can be the guy that's doing the fence, or the guy that shows up to the banquet, buys a gun raffle ticket, and that money goes into the fencing project. And so it's kind of a public knowledge. So what we did is we're in a unique situation. My family's been filming on the winter range for these deer for over 40 years. And we're in a unique situation because we have video of deer on the winter range before the oil wells were there, before it was really an oil field. We have film of deer when it was an oil field. We have film of these 3 deer we called, my dad dubbed the Wyoming living legends. It's Popeye, Morty, and Goliath. And he made them literally living legends at one time. Of course, that was in the middle of the 90s, so they're not living anymore, but their offspring is. And so we took that video plus my father, who's still alive, his knowledge of hanging out on the winter range filming when I was a kid and even older than that, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and took him, and he loves to take photos now. So we took him out on the winter range. We took some photos of wintering bucks and just kind of picked his brain. You know, what's this look like? What did it look like in the 60s? Whenever everybody says, oh, it was the heyday of mule deer. Picked his brain there, picked Kevin Monteith's, Dr. Monteith's brain on what does this all mean, picked Gary Freilich's brain on what he's seen over the last 27 years, picked Casey Stimler's brain on what is the federal government's point on this, what are they looking for, and we put it all in a documentary that we're releasing over Thanksgiving weekend that is going to basically show where deer came from, where they're headed, and what we are doing as a population, as hunters and conservationists, to maintain a population, a good, healthy population in this area. Now, the beauty of this is it's not just Wyoming. They're using this as a test subject for other states. The Department of Interior was tasked with all 11 Western states. So all 11 Western states submitted projects to them to be funded. Out of the 11 Western states, every single one of them is doing a mule deer project. Every one of them. In fact, some states like Wyoming, Colorado, California are doing multiple mule deer projects. So they're using Wyoming as a test subject. Idaho, Oregon, they all are doing something with mule deer, and this is the beginning of it. So we're trying to get the word out there early. Hey, get involved, Joe Finicknick Hunter, Joe Finicknick Conservationist. Get involved with your conservation organization with knowledge. This is all knowledge. So when you're talking to your buddies and you're like, oh, remember back in the heyday with mule deer, you can actually be informed and discuss this is really what's going on. It's not what we all think. In fact, Gary Freilich's recorded from 2012 to 2016 was some of the best mule deer hunting in that area in history. They had actually hit their management goals. They were killing it. Then they had a couple really bad winters, plus some oil field stuff, plus. But it was epic, and it can be epic again if we do it right. I'm sorry. I just completely diarrhea the mouth, James.
I get excited about it too. And, you know, mule deer have nationally been in decline since 1959, right? And they've seen that in every Western state. And if we look at Oregon, for example, it's been really bad. Like, we've lost about half of our deer in just the last couple of years. And people tend to blame whatever they're ready to be mad about. So if they're mad about predators, then they're like, oh, we got to get these lions and wolves and coyotes knocked down. And if they're mad about ranchers, they're like, you know, all these fences and all this ag is really messing with the deer. Or, you know, if they're mad about something else, you know, they're going to blame logging, hunting pressure, poaching, whatever. But the reality is all of these factors do have an influence on a deer population. And one of the things that I've really appreciated that's come out of Wyoming is that what you guys have identified is that predation doesn't necessarily hurt a healthy mule deer herd. But once they get compromised by a few other factors, then predation can have a really serious effect.
Those guys, every single one of those, the biologist, Gary, Kevin, and Casey all said, if it was one thing, we'd just fix it. If it was predation, we'd fix that. If it was land ownership, we'd fix that. It's not. It's a lot of little things. It's like putting drops of water in a bucket, and pretty soon the 5-gallon bucket's full. It's a lot of little things that affect this deer population. So what their point is to fix what they can. Predation, they can control it to a point. Human population, they can control that to a point. Obviously, hey, I drive a 1-ton truck. I don't want oil and gas to go away, but I do want it done responsibly. There's ways now to do it responsibly. And I think, honestly, talking with the oil companies, they want to do it responsibly because they look at it as if we do it responsibly, we get to keep doing it. If we don't do it responsibly, it's going to get taken away. They want to do it responsibly, as does everybody. So it's just not one thing, and everybody's on board. It's very important. And Oregon's no different. I've seen some of the plans for you guys' studies. It's going to be really neat to see, because it's not going to be Wyoming's problems. They may be some of the same problems or all the same problems, but one may be worse than the other, and how they fix it will be different. It's going to be fun to watch.
Oregon really likes to differentiate populations with highways and interstates. So
Yep.
Oregon considers itself to have two different mule deer populations. So everything north of I-84, which is northeast Oregon, they call a non-migratory population. And we tend to have a lot more verticality there. We've got mountains and canyons, and these deer migrate vertically throughout the year. But while it may be a few thousand feet, it's not a long distance. And then as you get into the more arid and desert type country, now they're traveling great distances, and that's the stuff that's south of the interstate. And then with the Rocky Mountain elk and the Roosevelt elk, that's distinguished by the interstate I-5 as well. So it's kind of an interesting take where we're managing these wildlife populations based off of a strip of asphalt that goes across the ground. But you've got to do something. It has to start somewhere.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things Wyoming found out, we have a very similar problem. We have the I-80 corridor that goes down across the southern part of our state. And a lot of mule deer migrated from the southern part of the state up into the Red Desert. That I-80 corridor cut that off. And when they started putting overpasses, wildlife overpasses, it completely changed the migration. It's gotten way better. Yeah. So they have the tools to fix that. And then it's not, you know, the migration isn't dictated by what we do, it's dictated by them, the wildlife.
Is it the does that are showing the bucks and fawns where to go, or does everybody kind of know where to go in these migrations?
No. So here's one of the craziest things I never thought of, but they have it documented. So they collared a doe in like 2013. In 2016, they started collaring, or 2015, they started collaring fawns. Then in 2018, they started collaring bucks as well. There's the basin, and I kid you not, there's a basin that some of my guys went into. Brandon and Scott went into a basin, and they found a collared buck. They videoed it. It's on this video. They found a collared buck. So we tell Gary, hey, here's a photo of your collared buck. He's like, oh, I know where that buck is. He goes, if you'd have went down to the bottom of that basin, his mom's there. So what happened is, his mom would have that fawn in June at some point, and that fawn, being a buck, then migrated to that same spot every year. This buck's 5 years old. He hasn't been with his mom in 4 years. But you can go into a basin, and all those deer are related. That buck, that 5-year-old buck, is with an 8-year-old buck that was the fawn of that doe 9 years ago. It's crazy. Now, here's the other crazy thing about deer that they just found out. Bucks in this area, and it differentiates, but in this area, Gary has never checked a 10-year-old deer, a buck deer, never. It's always been younger than that. And he said, I've checked 3-year-old deer that are 4 points, 2-year-old deer that are 2x3s. He said, but I've checked multiple times. They've been collaring these deer since 2013. He goes, we have collared 15-year-old does, and not one or two, multiple of them. Yeah. So this doe is having 8, 7, 10 fawns out of, let's say 10, 5 of them are bucks. They're all living in the same basin. It's like walking into somebody's house when you go into a basin to hunt.
That's pretty cool. I think the elk do a lot the same. And of course, elk herds tend to, be a lot bigger different times of the year. But a couple of years ago, a friend of mine and I were out shed hunting, and I picked up a right and a right from 2 years ago and from this year that were almost on top of each other, just a couple feet apart from the same bull. and threw him in my pack, and we met up at the end of the day, and I told him about it, and he goes, well, I found a left and a left right on top of each other. I said, let me see him. That was 2 miles away, where in not like flat, easy miles, like take you all day to get there kind of miles. And that bull had dropped his right and his right in one spot and his left and his left in the other spot.
2 years in a row.
2 years in a row. Exactly the same spot.
Jeez.
So if you want to talk about the consistency and the habitual nature of these animals, like there's a great example.
Oh, yeah.
He was doing the exact same thing at the exact same time, multiple years in a row, over quite a large distance. It's incredible.
We're not that different. I love coming home, and I'm sure everybody has their thing. It's just like animals. They have their thing where they go in the winter, where they lose their antlers, where they breed, all that. It's no different.
Yeah. Well, I do think that it's cool that there's a group of people that are trying to figure it out, because there is also a big group of people who definitely care about deer, but they've just given up. They're like, it's over, the time has passed. And in Eastern Oregon, the time passed maybe before I ever got a chance. There was great deer hunting in the 60s and 70s, and, started to diminish in the 80s. There's still a few big bucks in the 90s. We saw a couple big deer this year, but the population is just gone. It can come back. We can fix this stuff. We still have a viable population. And if you look at species like bison, we got those down to just a couple animals, and then we're able to bring the species back from that.
Right.
Not to the extent that they were, but we have this opportunity with mule deer where we really can do it if we learn about what needs to be done that we can actually do.
And they've proven it. I mean, they had like I said, they had their best years between 2012 and 2016 before 2 really, really bad winters in a row. They had their best years. And part of it is because they understood how to manage them. And they start, in 2014, they started putting these underpasses, which help. And we can do this, and it doesn't take a ton, it's not a magic formula to it. It's simple things. Buying a chunk of property, putting some overpasses in, putting some good fences in that are wildlife friendly. All this stuff are huge. They make it's just knocking away those drops in that bucket. And pretty soon you go, well, we're managed predators, we've managed fences, we've managed highway crossings, we've managed corridors, these places that they're all migrating to. And so all they're having to do is habitat, and we can actually help them with a little habitat here and there. Where, this, like in the Red Desert, they have a problem with their alder. A lot of their alder is dying. For some reason, it's dying. Great. Let's figure out how to make that alder, which is a huge staple for them in January and February and some of the worst months. Let's figure out how to make it come back. Or is it a natural thing? The other thing that Gary said is it might just be old and need to die off, and new stuff needs to grow. And if that's the case, let's go in there with the old dead stuff, go in there and mow swaths of it and plant new stuff so that it's like, it's your ranch. It's like row crops. All of a sudden, you're a wheat farmer where you have stuff that's at rest, and you have stuff that's new, and you have stuff that's dying off, and it just keeps, laying through there. And that's the stuff we can do with not a huge problem. Actually not even that much money. The highway crossings are the most expensive, and with the Department of Interior wanting to help with that, that's easy.
That's awesome. Well, I think it's really cool. I can't wait to see the video. Brandon said he got to take a peek at it a couple days ago and was just blown away. I'm excited to see it come out. If people do want to get involved in this stuff, I'm going to give them a couple of options. So let's say that they can identify a place where deer are historically crossing in their area. And let's say, all right, they're going to go up to the landowner and offer to rebuild their fence so that it's now wildlife friendly. What does wildlife friendly fence look like for mule deer crossings?
It's actually not that hard. It isn't pulling the wire out. What it is it's replacing T-posts with wooden posts, and on the top of the wooden post is a wooden pole that goes between the wooden posts, and that's all it is. And you don't have to do miles and miles and miles of it. If you recognize a place where they're migrating year after year after year. In fact, there's a spot that I had to run to an elk area, late season elk area just closed on Sunday, and we had to go gather up our camp yesterday. And there's a spot on the highway where the antelope, and I'm talking 400-yard spot, that the antelope migrate. And I'm not talking one or two, I'm talking thousands of antelope will pile up against this fence, and then they jump it, go underneath it, 2 or 3 at a time, and then they run the gauntlet across the busy highway in front of Kanye's place, and that's not a lie, it's literally in front of Kanye West's house, run across the highway, and then do it again. If you took that chunk of fence and and you probably have 100 posts, maybe 200 posts and 100 poles, if you took that, it'd mitigate all of the issue that they have, so when they cross the fence, it's easy enough to get across the highway. Or, because it's a highway, you get the highway department to put an underpass in there. It's just a tunnel. It's basically a glorified culvert, and they'll go underneath that. So you go to landowner and say, hey, do you mind if we buy 300 posts and 200 chunks of pole and just replace this in the same spot the wire fence, or in the same spot that the T-posts were? Your wire will maintain, your cows aren't going to get out, and put it in there. And a nonprofit organization does it for a couple $1,000.
Yeah, and that's a great project. That's something you can bring kids in and get them involved with. And it's like planting trees. You know, you're going to see that in your lifetime, and it feels like something that you'll never really see the benefit from. But the reality is, if you just do it now and get after it, you will start to see these results, and it's important.
That's right. Absolutely.
What else can people do to get involved that actually makes a difference?
You know, one of the things is with the current political stance, I encourage these guys, hey, write a letter to your state senator, write a letter to your state representatives, and tell them that this is important. Inform them of what is going on. Send them some links. We got some links in this YouTube video. By the way, this is going to be out on YouTube the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. There's links in there on the information. Tell a senator, tell your representative, talk to your local biologist, your local game warden. If you have a commissioner, like in Wyoming, we have game and fish commissioners that run our game and fish departments. Just send a letter or a note to them. You would be surprised. So I have a friend here in Wyoming that's the president of our Wyoming Game and Fish Commission. He's been a friend a long time before he was that. And I mentioned, gosh, how often do you guys get letters and compliments or complaints? He goes, you know what? Oddly enough, hardly ever. They love hearing from the Joe Finicknick, the people that are involved. Send them a letter. Show up to a meeting. One of the other things is get involved in a nonprofit organization. If it's a national one like Mule Deer Foundation or Rocky Mountain Foundation, Elk Foundation, or if it's a local one like the Muley Fanatics or somebody, we have a Wyoming Sportsman's Alliance here in Wyoming, something like that. And I'm not talking about get on the board and donate 1,000 hours. I'm talking about just grab a board member and go, what can I do? I have 10 hours this week. What can I do? If it's going around to get donations, or if it's showing up at a banquet and getting a raffle ticket for a rifle and buying a dinner and enjoying your time with like-minded people, just do it. I know we're all really, really busy and we're all trying to make a living out here, and in the current state, it's not easy. But if you get involved 10, 15 hours a year, that's it. 10 or 15 hours. You get involved, and we got 10 or 1,500 people do that. That's a huge impact. Huge impact.
Absolutely. And it actually works. It actually does some good. And I can't stress that enough. There's a lot of organizations that are just talk. There's a lot of meetings where people just get together and nothing actually occurs from it. But if you go out there and actually move some material around and put up some posts and polls, like, you are making a difference, and it's not that difficult. It's not a big time suck. It's not a big money suck. And it sure enough is going to change our ability to keep such an iconic species around for future generations.
When you leave there going, man, I accomplished something this week. I was outside, which we all try and do anyway. I was outside. I was with like-minded people. I got to teach that kid how to hammer a nail in or dig a post hole or cut a notch out of a pole. That's just fun. And one thing I like about outdoorsmen is we're very like-minded. We're a very shy group of people because naturally, if you want to be outside and out in the outdoors, you don't want to be around a lot of people. So that's one of the things we overcome. But you want to be with like-minded people. We're all like-minded. We're all talking hunting. We're all talking about mule deer. And you never know. Maybe you're Gary Freilich and Kevin Monteith at a mule deer banquet, and you start talking, or at a moose banquet, and you start talking about mule deer, and you've spawned something like this that is it equates to tens of millions of dollars and thousands of deer lives changed because you're at a like-minded organizational banquet.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's pretty cool. Like I said, I can't wait to see this. So this is coming out on Monday. 2 days later, this video is going to come out. Where can people see it?
YouTube, Eastmans Hunting Journal's YouTube channel. It's called Imperiled, and it's the mule deer project by the Mule Deer Migration Initiative. We've spent a lot of time. I personally have spent hundreds of hours on this thing. We actually flew. So one of the big deer was Popeye, and my brother and I talked to a guy that had taken a photo of that deer in the summer. He found the deer in the summer. Didn't really know what he had until he distributed it. Anyway, so we pinpointed that on the map. I'm a pilot, so my brother and I got in the plane, and we flew his migration patterns because we knew where he was wintering, and we flew from there to his summer pattern or summer migration, and how far that is unreal. When you go from a desert floor all the way up to 10:15 or 10, I think it's 10:5, where he was summering, crosses 3 major rivers, 2 mountain ranges. It's awesome. Unbelievable. So it's YouTube, Eastman's Hunting Journal's YouTube channel, Imperiled, the Mule Deer Migration Initiative.
Awesome, Mike. Well, thank you very much. Please tell everyone on your end of things hello. And
I will.
Keep doing what you're doing, man. I love it.
I will. I appreciate it, James. You have a good day. Good luck hunting in Nebraska. They're killing some giants. I've seen a couple good ones.
Yeah, thank you. And, I apologize for the background noise. I'm in a Love's truck stop parking lot right now. I'm on my way to go hunt, but you guys got the point. Anyway. Was
that a shameless plug? Are you sponsored by Love's?
No. I had to look over and see what it was. So, yeah. Okay.
Well, thanks, James. Enjoy your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the show. This episode was edited by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Artwork for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatterlin and digitized by Celia Christofferson. If you enjoyed the show, I encourage you to share it with a friend and subscribe. You can find photos and more content on Instagram at Six Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.